So whatever got you to your place, I was rather disciplined in what I was doing. Great. So you need to become more disciplined in order to scale. So that realization of who you need to become before, as a step before you start these external metrics is what game plan does. And that's a very valuable thing because you focus on what's important to you.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Tax Rep Network podcast. I'm Eric Green. Joining me again is Dr. Rick Wells. Rick is my go-to financial advisor for my clients, myself. And if you haven't listened, been on one of our webinars, so Rick has a really interesting background. Retired Lieutenant Marine Colonel, went into education, has a doctorate in education leadership, and is a financial advisor where he continues educating professionals and families in terms of just covering themselves. And we've talked about all that before. There is a guide, by the way, that Rick and I put together. You can download it. I'll put the link below. It's free on basically the financial planning that every tax professional should know, right? Insurance, disability, long-term care, retirement plans. Because I have to tell you, there are a lot of our tax rep members who don't have this, which is an issue. What I wanted to talk about today, though, Rick, you were on the other podcast with me and Tony at Success Tax, and we did a whole series on the framework that you laid out, game plan. It actually, I think, it lends itself to everything. Your business. What is your game plan for business? Your game plan for your financial life, your family life, right? It's something that I've really kind of latched onto and I'm using myself. I've been trying to explain it to members, and I just thought it'd be good if we could just review that here.
Yeah.
So first of all, thanks for taking the time. But um, can you lay out what the framework is, what game plan is?
Well, of course, that's something I love talking about. First, yeah, thank you for having me on. This is awesome. Not only do I enjoy spending time with you socially, but when we get together professionally and think of different ways to serve people, that's very exciting to me, and I appreciate that very much. And especially someone who listens to my, the framework that you outline. As someone who spent time, quarter century teaching people how to, and dealing in the institution of learning and in matters of leadership in the Marine Corps, one of the more storied leadership organizations ever, and now in the current industry. I think, you learn that it's very easy for people to misunderstand each other and to be misunderstood. So game plan is just a way to orient yourself, particularly with leadership. You find yourself in leadership positions all the time because it's some sort of transition. So professionals in transition could help from a reorientation. Individuals who are about to have children, that's going to be something new. So that's a big transition. And game plan is just a way for you to transform before you transition.
No, what I get a lot of, and I have many thoughts on this, but I get a lot of, you know, I understand I'd like to scale, but it's overwhelming to them. Uh, First and foremost, I think what I like about the framework, which we'll get into, is getting yourself focused or like reoriented. It is so easy today, simple to get overwhelmed between social media, the constant bombardment, text messages, emails. It's the fraudsters. It's very simple to just get overwhelmed. So first and foremost, I'd recommend to anyone listening, get off social media. You'll actually feel better. It'll be a very hard 2 weeks, but I'd say by the third week, you're going to start feeling way better. The other thing is, I don't care what everyone else is doing. That's not me. That's not my problem. I got stuff in front of me. I don't care what my high school friends had for dinner last night or where they think they're going on vacation. It literally doesn't matter. And so focus on what's important. But with the game plan framework, what I like about it is it forces you to we used the metaphor on the other podcast and before we went live here. You're kind of at the foot of the mountain, you're looking up at the mountain, all right? And it's really about focusing that on that. What are the steps? How am I going to get from here to there? Because once you have a game plan, it's just executing the plan. It's I think when people say, "Well, I want something," but there's no game plan to get there, there's no concrete steps, it's in the ether. It's not real, and the idea is to make it real. And
Yeah.
and the thing is you start with yourself.
You started with the problem and now you ended kind of with the solution. And with game plan, it's kind of a neat series that I do intentionally with professionals in transition and folks taking on new endeavors. And each letter represents a step of the process. And what you're talking about is the fourth step where you're expressing your best self. And it goes to what you commit to. People who are busy and feel anxious often overcommit. And so what that means, commitment is you're dedicating your time and attention, your time and your treasure towards something that's not necessarily meaningful to you. And so you don't know, you seem busy, but you're not moving forward. So that level of commitment is identified and made known. And you also talked about scaling. That's what people tend to do. They say, okay, I'm in this position and I'm doing okay. Now I want to scale. And now you're looking at an outside metric. My idea is you need to look in, it's from the inside out first. So it's a matter of betterment. So whatever got you to your place, I was rather disciplined in what I was doing. Great. So you need to become more disciplined in order to scale. So that realization of who you need to become before, as a step before you start these external metrics is what game plan does. And that's a very valuable thing because you focus on what's important to you, as you mentioned in your last statement.
So, can you break down because each letter stands for something,
Yeah.
right? So, let's
It,
break
it,
down
y-
game plan.
yeah. Each of these times, I was a school teacher. So each of these times that I was going through these transitions in my own life, I was very careful to take notes. My mom taught me that this life is, is a gift. So treat it as such. So I'm like, all right, I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing as I do different things in my life. For example, joining the Marine Corps out of college, very meaningful to me. Yeah. So G is games have rules, and we can talk about that. I could talk about that for days. That is often people are playing the game and they don't know the rules or they don't understand the rules. And the thing about you know people like you and people like you attract, you're in uncharted territory, right? So your rules have to be self-imposed oftentimes. In the Marine Corps, we had standards and very clear for us. So I was like, okay, if we're very successful, and one of the reasons we're successful is our high standards. Okay, if you weren't a Marine, what would you do? Well, you have to impose your own standards on your physical activity and your professional development and how you lead and treat people. Those would have to be self-imposed and identified. And that has a lot to do with your philosophy. So that's what the first part is about. Um, and A is attitude. And that's another thing I learned in the Marine Corps. You have to, it's basically how you show up day to day. And that should be conscious. You should be conscientious about that. And that lays itself on convictions. So, for example, one of my convictions is things that are worthwhile, you should decide to finish them well. We're like, Wells, where does that even come from? Well, when I was early on in my career in Marine Corps, I was like, okay, I haven't finished a lot of things well. I kind of dabbled in college baseball. I didn't dabble. I had a fairly successful 4-year career in Division III baseball. Like if I had to do it all over again, I'd do it a little differently. So now here I am 6 to 8 years in the Marine Corps. I was like, all right, I'm going to retire, and retirement 20 years. And at that point, I was like, all right, if I'm going to retire, then I'm going to finish this thing well. I'm going to learn what I need to learn. I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to participate. I'm going to take care of my people. And that was my lens moving forward. So now I take that with me. That's a part of my attitude on those things that I commit to. That's how if you want to be successful, that's one of my convictions. So coming to that realization of what are those non-negotiables for yourself is a big part of what game plan does for you.
I will tell you on our side, the attitude piece, I think really shows up with I have been very successful building a practice, attracting clients, attracting tax rep members. I would have told you it's because I'm real. I am who I am. But interesting, my staff had a slightly different take on it. They said, "You actually want to help people."
Mm.
And that actually comes through. And I've heard this from other very successful people that they approach things from, I'm here to help, I'm here to serve, I want more peace, more joy, more, calm. And so for the tax professionals listening to this, is everything just seem like drudgery? Or are you there to actually help? And if you can get your head around, "I'm here to help and serve," yes, you wanna get paid for it, but the point being that that attitude comes through. That is very attractive to potential clients, to the people that are relying on you when they feel that you actually have their best interest at heart. One of the things, Rick, I like about you, I mean, while we're on the topic, is you've never tried to sell shit to my clients that they don't need. All right. I appreciate the fact that you're honest. Here's where you are. Here's what your goals are, and here's what we can do. Here are your options to achieve that. Versus you can walk in and say, "Oh, yep, you need this, you need this, you need this, sign this, and we're done." Clients don't like that. That's what makes clients say, "You know what? I'll get back to you," and they go off somewhere else. It's really the approach, and that's your attitude, and it does come through. It's like a vibe. You send vibes, and, I know there's a theory that we're all sort of connected that way at a subconscious level. That vibe comes through, and so if you're somebody who's struggling in terms of attracting clients, keeping clients, I wouldn't whine about them. I would focus more on you. What is the vibe you're putting out?
One of the homework assignments when I go through game plan with professionals and folks, one of the assignments is to actually it's a homework assignment. It's actually something that you already did, and I asked them, "Is it what do you want to be known for?" And that's a challenging question, and you can answer it like you did. You can internally and figure it out, but then you can go ask people that you work with, people that care about you, and they'll tell you, "Yeah, no, dude, you're here to serve."
Yep.
And to continue, that's what the P in game plan is. It's purpose precedes passion. What it is that you do. A simple question that's asked in the protocol is what do you do? Now, there's a huge tendency for people to respond with a noun. Well, what do I do? Oh, I'm a lawyer, or I'm a teacher, or um, or I'm a mom or dad. They're like, what do you mean? That's a noun. So my question was, what is it that you do? So your answer should be a verb. Specifically, it should be one verb. Well, you may be like, well, is this fairly simple? What are you talking about? Well, if you're responding to what do you do as a position, that means you are focused on externals, right? And the only way for you really to get any relief, you mentioned being anxious and things. The only way for you to get any relief is for external uh, touches, for things on the outside of your control to make you feel better. Whereas if I say, "Hey, Eric, what is it that you do?" And you say, "Hey, I serve my clients." That is not something that anyone other than you can control. Now you're living of this. That's a purpose. That's a purpose driven statement. You are clear on what you do. It's not an external. Again, it's from the inside out. And there's no one that can stop you when you're serving like that. And I think a huge outcome is what you just mentioned. You attract success, you attract successful people, you attract people that you can serve, and everyone feeds on that goodness that's created.
No, I solve tax problems.
Mm,
That's
mhm.
what I do. And I educate tax professionals.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Well, now let me and I'll expand on this, and this is a great example. That verb is related to your professional life. Now understand in the coaching wheel, you have your professional life, you have your health, you have your family and relationships, you have your faith and your spirituality, and you have your stewardship of your finances. So, serving your clients, or what was it, you solve problems is a professional response. Understand that again, this goes back to the G. Solving problems may not be the most inspired verb for your family. They may want your love and time, right? Or your health. What's the verb there? So you can see how clarity of identity comes forth in this protocol. My wife said, "What you do is you coach the who." There's off there. You'll hear out there that there's you got to find your why.
Yep.
Well, you got to know who you are before you start finding your why. If you start finding your why without knowing who you are, it's going to be a long, hard struggle and
Yep.
search.
Well, you pick, Simon Sinek is, find you why, but he does point out that, who you are. People will tell him, well, I'm this, they're naming their job.
Yeah.
You're not an attorney. You're not a saw gunner. You're not a painter. You're probably many things. And so it is interesting you point out that how often people lead that. So, we have games have rules, attitude, M.
That's make the climb. It's making the climb in this part of the protocol. It's about goal setting, and there's a secret to goal setting, and it is you know hidden in plain sight. But you know the goal. We just finished. We just came into a new year. People set goals. What I found and what I learned from Jim Rohn, who happens to be the mentor of Tony
Yep.
Robbins, is that there's one extra step that comes about when you write down your goals or when you uh, engage in a goal setting process. So you talk about the things that you want and what you want to achieve and what do you want to learn, what do you want to contribute to and produce. And you go through a whole list, and in the protocol you list 50 things that it is that you want. And then we break it into short, mid, and long term, and we go through that mental gymnastics, and there's clarity. And then comes the most important question in goal setting, which is too often, not done. And the question is, who must you become in order to achieve that which you desire? Now, the focus isn't on the outcome. The focus on what type of leader do I need to become? What type of communicator do I need to become? What kind of team member do I need to become? What type of task accomplisher do I need to become in order to become that ideal that you put at the top of the mountain? It reduces a tremendous amount of frustration. I'll tell you, my wife she authored 2 books. She has a co-author. They write together. They each take a character. It's a domestic thrillers. They characters switch chapters, and then at the end, these characters come together at the end. So she authored 2 books, and incredible feat. She has 4. We have 4 kids. The other author has 2. They're professionals outside. How do you do such a thing? That's a whole nother story. But she came home one day and she was complaining that she needed to do edits, and you can see the anxiety. And people come home. Teachers come home. They complain they have to do report cards. Yeah, it's similar to me, like a Marine coming home and complaining that he's low crawling through the mud. It's what you do. If I said you wanted to become an author, you're an author. You're a successful author. Authors edit. Authors get rejected. Authors get into conflict with their agents. This is what you do.
Right.
So that understanding who you need to become makes it an inside journey. And the frustration that it's not that you don't get frustrated, but you have a sense of serenity while you're climbing the mountain.
Yeah. I always think of that term, embrace the suck,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
you know? But it's true. I like to be a Marine, but look, Rick, I don't want to get dirty.
Right,
I
right.
don't like bugs.
I don't wanna be hungry.
I don't like being on the water. I get motion sick. You know what? You might find a different profession,
I can't swim.
right? Um,
Right, you don't want it enough. Right.
yeah, and
That's,
being a
yeah,
Marine
no,
may not be the career for me. Yeah, no,
yeah,
listen, listen, I want to be a professional athlete, but I don't like to sweat. And I don't like to work out. Well,
right.
yeah, yeah, that's going to be short lived. And so continuing on, we got GAME,
Yeah, we talked about expressing your best self, where
right?
that's where you are clear on what's important to you so that how you're spent you we align, any contradictions. So, how it starts is, let's list 5 things that are important to you. Great. You put that down, and then I say, "Okay, take out your checkbook and your calendar, and we're gonna see if how you're spending your time, and where you're giving your attention is aligned with, that which you deem important." So that's, we touched on that in the.
One thing I do want to add, though, for folks listening, I know that when you've heard this a number of times, you do need to write down this stuff, and the reason for that, I'm somebody who never wrote anything down. I'd
Mhm.
sit and I think about it and whatever. Once you write it down, I've heard this term, and I think there's something to it. It's like you breathe life into it. When you write it down, it becomes real. And there's something, I don't know if you found this, Rick. There's something, it becomes more solid. I don't know if that, I'm not really expressing it the right way.
It is a function of commitment. So when, I keep my journals, I got this one on Cape Cod. I'm very happy about this. I was very excited to find it. Writing it down is so most people look at the continuum of leadership or leader and follower. I tend to like to think of it as leader or student. So if you're not leading, you're a student. So you should be a student accountant, a student teacher, a student mother or father. And in order to be a student, you have to be able to study. So in order for you to study something, it has to come out of your mind and onto the paper. And now you can study it. Now you can analyze it. The mind, the short term memory, and everything else that here is not meant to analyze things, especially things like someone's convictions, how they want to live their life. I know that when we used to hump or hike around the base for conditioning, there's a 5-page order that went with that. This is where the water is going to be. This is where the cornman is going to be. This is where the road guards are going to come out. This is the equipment that you're going to have. So if it's important enough for you or for us to write down a 5-page order just to walk around the block, if you're trying to design a worthwhile life, it requires you to write some stuff down. And you can take that into each of your life. So yes, becoming a student and writing it down is powerful. The most powerful technology, and that's not hyperbole, that's not exaggeration, is pen and paper.
Listen, so right now in tax rev, we're running a 6 month to double your practice, double your income.
Wow.
With the idea being, you need to think differently. If I said, look, we're going to grow, you got to grow 20%. You and I know what we're going to do. You'll start a referral program. You'll send some more emails and make a few more phone calls, and you're there. If you have to double, now you have to step back and what am I not thinking about? Was there a much different approach to things? But what I tell them is, if you if you're right now making 150,000 a year, and you come to me and say, I want to make 300,000 next year. Okay, well, let's see where you are now. All right. That's another 150. It's about 12.5 a month. Well, one average rep case is $8,300. So that means you got to get 3 new cases every 2 months. So how are you going to do that? And before you know it, it's, you know what? I can do this. It's not overwhelming. It's sort of the whole, you have a dream. Well, if you write it down, now you have a goal. If you break down the steps to get there, now you have a plan.
Yeah.
And all you need to do is get up each day and get after, just get after it. Just work on the plan. And if I told people you could double, you need to get another case to 2 cases a month, they'd be like, that's it. I could do that. Right
Yeah.
now. And if they're like, "Ooh, how do I do that?" Well, all right, well, let's work on that. What is our marketing plan? What's our networking plan? All of that. Do your clients even know you do this? That kind of stuff. We get into the nitty-gritty details, but it starts with writing it down. And what I have found is when people write it down, it becomes real. It's more manageable when it's on paper in front of you versus in your head, because
Yeah.
doubling sounds, like hard, like impossible.
Yeah. What you're touching on is interesting because it confirms, that there is a process to this betterment, which is the essence of education, which is betterment. And and it goes to the L, which is learning on purpose or learning to read. When you tell someone to do that, and we'll continue with, they're at the foot of the mountain there. So when you read, you realize, and one of my, life changing things that I've read was Dante's Inferno. He was at the bottom of the mountain and he found himself in a dark wood. So, the clients that are coming to you are finding themselves in a dark wood and they're anxious and they're scared and they're unsure of themselves. And then they take a step maybe by themselves to go up the mountain. And what are they faced with? The three challenges, the three temptations of greed, pride, and lack of self control. And, he finds himself in a dark wood. He's trying to go up. He finds himself, a she leopards in front of him, greed, avarice, and everything else. But what allows him to move forward is what your place and what tax rep network would represent is the mentor, the poet Virgil. He comes along and guides him through, lets him know it's possible, has him walk past these temptations in a meaningful way. So that you're providing an outstanding service to people who want to better themselves and increase their business, do well by their family. And don't forget the other thing that got Dante through, and that was his love for Beatrice, which goes back to your original point where, you're here to serve, you're here to take care of people, you love your clients. So that love, it needs to be understood. You got to love what you do and find what it is that's moving you to take this place in the world. And for me, look, it's serious business. So, and when you read, you realize, these existential questions and the anxiety that they're not new. Like very smart people have written about them, and it's archetypal. And there are some solutions that can be come about. And then someone like you comes along and said, "Hey, let me help you through this." And now everyone wins, and I love that.
Well, and the attitude, that part, do our associates view this as a job, or do they view it as being trained for a career?
Mm,
And if they embrace the fact that, you know what, I am, they're giving me a career. We're literally paying you to learn how to do this so that you're at some point either a partner or maybe you've left and gone on your own. But, there are real skills, and so how you show up every day, are you here to punch the clock, or are you here because you understand there's a process to this and you're learning? It's like that with anything, we see this. My thought, and we've toyed with this, we can provide CPE credits for our programs, but we actually do just as well if we offer no CPE. No, there are some people we're not gonna get because all they wanna do is get their credits and move on. But if you want the education, if you're here to educate yourself because it's a skill you can use to help clients make more money, grow your practice, it's not about the CPE credit. And so it's really, I think, so much of this, and I think so much of people's success, they control with their attitude, how they show up.
Yeah.
Um,
Which lends itself to the A. Oh my gosh, look at this, how it's rolling through it. And
yeah,
that's act and
I
that's
wish we'd planned these segues, but I
yeah,
didn't.
and that's act as if. So act as if comes from Dorothea Brand's book she wrote in the 20s, I think, Wake Up and Live. And you've heard it because there are memes and there's act as if it were impossible to fail, right? What people don't know is that realization for her comes in chapter 6. Chapter 1 through 5, she's telling you how that works. One of the big reasons it's important is because you your body, your subconscious remembers the pain of your successes. So the hurts that you had, the clients that were lost, the fun that was made of you because you didn't know how to do something, the failure of a fitness exam, all of these things, and even all the things that come about that were setbacks that were painful to you. Even though at the end your success, your subconscious doesn't forget those painful experiences. So acting as if, embodying that which you would like to become is key to you showing up properly. And it's chicken egg. People think, well, once I get the promotion, then I'll act like the leader.
Right,
No, you have to act like the leader, then you get the promotion.
right.
And you find that pattern across examples. If you start your reading journey, you'll find that there's that golden thread that is through all of these pieces of work, literature, and such. And you'll find out that that is a truism.
So Ed Milet, has a podcast on, he mentions in one of his podcasts that when he was struggling, what he suggested and what he did is he called it touching the dream. So if he had like a decent month, whatever, he and his wife would go away to like the Four Seasons or something. He would play golf. She would go to the spa. He pulls up and, after a couple of times, they're like, "Oh, hello, Mr. Milet." He began to feel like he belonged there
Yeah.
among wealthier people, whatever.
Yeah.
People who are like, "Oh, I hate public speaking." Practice,
Yep.
practice to the wall, practice on Zoom, right? You can look at yourself. Then you practice in front of your friends. The original tax rep training I did for a room full of friends, 2 CPAs, 2 AAs, and 2 attorneys to get feedback.
Yeah.
You basically act as if. If you want to be a great public speaker, you start pretending public speaking. You get to a small crowd. Before you know it, it doesn't matter if I have 20 people in the room or 300 people at Foxwoods. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You get over it, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And so you're right. If you're somebody who wants to be a leader, start leading, start acting like one, and you'll become one versus I'm going to wait to and then I'll start leading. Because
Yeah.
then you're going to get frustrated because you're never going to get the promotion. You're never going to be put in that position.
Yeah. This is where the imagination comes in, and it becomes fun. Or I would even venture to say it becomes delightful. Like, what do you plan on doing with all of this? With the promotions, with the homes, with the car, what is it all about? It really is about the journey rather than the destination. And it could be something as simple as, hey, you want to make more money? Fine. Start shaking hands like someone who has more money, right? Start, uh, taking care of your body like someone who owns this or that. And now you'll find one, you're already winning. So I think another way to put this, the best definition of success that I found is by Earl Nightingale, who happens to be a Marine too, passed away. He initiated the personal development movement. But he said success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, which means this: if you decide who you'd like to become and establish this worthy ideal by writing it down and designing it like it deserves to be designed. And you put that at the top of the mountain. Here's the beauty of it. Once you take one step toward that outcome, you are a success because it's the progressive realization. And you wake up and you take it doesn't matter what size of the step. If you design it and you take a step toward it, you're a success. And let me tell you, it feels magnificent. It's a way you should be walking around because your purpose here is meaningful. And if you'd like to discuss that, then read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and then call me up and buy me a coffee, and we'll talk all day on that.
Yep. Hard book to read, but not because it's not interesting, but, if it's somebody who grew up about Holocaust, history and stuff,
Yeah.
but no, it is a great book. And the other thing another way to say it, you do need to enjoy the journey. A lot of people like, "I'll be happy when,"
Yeah.
right? "I'll enjoy when." And, and don't get me wrong, it's great to have a goal, top of the mountain, whatever. But to your point, you want to enjoy the journey,
Yeah.
right? I
I,
mean,
you,
and by the way, I struggle with this as much as anyone.
yeah.
You get so focused on, "I've got it, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing." It's okay to take some time and turn around and be like, "You know what? I'm a third of the way up the mountain. I've made some progress here." Right? I can see progress is being made.
Yeah. Well, you're touching on the pivotal point of my life. And that's when I started. You talk about writing things down. That's when I started to document my journey. So I was trying to find what to do next after I got off of active duty in the Marine Corps. I was like, again, this life is a gift. I'm trained up. I feel I can do anything in the world. But the question is, what do I do? I learned in the Marine Corps that you meditate on your day and night 24 hours a day. You meditate on uniforms, physical fitness, evaluations, exercises. And then you want to make sure that you're climbing the right mountain. Your ladder is up against the right wall. So all these things. So I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? And I came across someone who gave the best advice that was as confusing, but gave me hope. And it was Joseph Campbell when his interview with Bill Moyer. And it's like, when you're confused, when you're having these existential questions and you just don't know where to do, what's the advice? And his advice was to follow your bliss. So I'm from New Jersey. I don't know what bliss means. So I had to go find what that means. And he says, and
Go
it was
look it up
basically,
first.
yeah, to look it up. I was like, thank you. I was like, I know there's something here, but I don't know what he's talking about. And it's follow your joy. So the thing about joy is that it's timeless. That's why you need to write it down. So at the end of the day, you think about, hey, where did I lose myself? Where did I just totally get engrossed in the activity? It's that type of time. Again, I was a school teacher for a quarter century. It's that once upon a time. And you'll realize that, there's certain conversations that you're having. There's certain activities that you're engaging in that you just lose yourself. In other words, you are loving that experience. So now you take those themes and you do more of those themes in your day than not. And you'll find that you're living the dream, literally. And if I can just clarify, because I think this is important, because when I was at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to teach young people. So the joy or the serenity is something that's different than the passion. That's why it's important to understand the distinction between who you are and the why you're doing it. Because the serenity is constant, but I'm excited when the student learns the multiplication table, angry or frustrated when the uh, administration tells me to do stuff that's going to waste my time. I'm excited when the kids are having a great time at recess, a little embarrassed when a parent complains about me. So those emotions are up and down, but the one thing that's constant is my joyful participation in that activity. So what you just brought up was a meaningful time in my life, and that was one of those pivotal moments.
Right. No. And so, for the folks listening, and by the way, even you're happy, you think you're on the right path. I find this exercise worth doing. I do it frequently, actually, but it is a really, it's important in all 5 aspects of your life.
Yep.
And, but if you are feeling lost, this is a good exercise to sit down and go through. Break down what is your game plan, right? Go element by element through this. And what I have at least found is it provides clarity. It helps me clarify my thinking. If I'm getting off, if I'm going in kind of an odd direction, I can, reorient and get back in. So anyway, I will put a link down for the financial planning guide that Rick, you and I had done when we did that webinar. But for folks who would like to reach out to you, they need help through their financial plan, talking through this. What's the best way to reach you?
I believe there's going to be the contact information in the booklet. But if you want to do it quickly, I can give my number. It's 860-680-9356. That's
Yep.
860-680-9356. And I must thank you. And let's end on the N, which is nurture your network. And that's has to do with professionals building ecosystems. And I think that you've done this here in a magnificent way. And the only way you do something as successful as this is you build it through care and you build trust. And what you mentioned, the easiest way, I think, well, it's not easy, but it's simple, is to have clarity on who you are and what you do. Then people trust you. They know that you deliver. So that building of that ecosystem in your network is something that you are an expert in. And I appreciate being a part of your ecosystem. Trust me, it's something I don't take for granted. I'm grateful each and every day. So thank you again.
Yeah, no, listen, and I like that we didn't get together for cigars. I like to pick your brain. So that's what friendship is. So yep, for everyone, you can reach Rick. He gave you his phone number. It's also rwells@baystatefinancial.com. There's also the guide I'm going to put a link to below, which I think you'll find very helpful, if nothing else, when you try to educate your clients. And Rick's contact information is there as well. So with that, Rick, thanks for taking the time. It's always good to review this.
Yes.
And for everyone, thank you for listening in this week and see you on next week's podcast.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric.